Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, heavily caffeinated weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football. I'm Eric Hansen. The guy in the other box is Tyler James. And collectively, we don't need no stinking bye week. Well, actually, we kind of do. But tonight we press on, and we're taking stock in Notre Dame football as Irish head into their first of two bye weeks with a 4-1 record, a number 14 ranking in the latest AP poll, and a long injury recovery list to unfurl when head coach Marcus Freeman next meets with the media. That'll be a week from tonight. Ahead on the show, we'll talk about what mattered most in Notre Dame's win over Louisville Saturday, what Marcus Freeman bye week priorities should look like, the big picture at what's at stake and what's coming up over the last 7 games of the season, the latest on the recruiting front, and we'll take your questions, so start filling up the queue right ahead on
I like to turn it up a little bit louder for that guitar lick at the end there.
I do too. And we thank Piano Man Steve and the band, and he's going to be in town for the Stanford game. Maybe we'll even have him on the show.
Yeah, just before we get into the show, as folks should know by now, it's always a good time to be a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com. You can give us a try with a 30-day free trial that's exclusive to our YouTube audience. Use promo code NDYT when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, which is where we spend a lot of our time. Our community shares all their opinions, and we drop our inside information there first. And as always, make sure you're subscribed to us here on the channel. That allow you to get questions in during the show. We'd like to hear from you, even if you're not watching us live. So please send some comments to us, like the video, and make sure you're subscribed. That all those things help us out in growing this Inside ND Sports YouTube channel.
Okay. Is that all you got?
That's all I got.
Okay. We need to, I'm sure, put up a banner here to let people know that they can send us some questions.
I got it. Here we go.
Okay. All right. Well, we're ready to rock. And where we're going to start with our opening drive is what mattered most in the 31-24 win over Louisville. So we'll give our top 3 takes here. And I'm going to go first to give you time to kind of marinate with this, Tyler, because Tyler's had a busy afternoon. Notre Dame got a men's basketball recruit today, a center, and lots of stuff going on in football recruiting. So my first take is Riley Leonard's play. He was 17 of 23 for 163 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. His 162.1 pass efficiency rating was by far the best of his time in a Notre Dame uniform, and about 90 points higher from when he played Louisville last year in his last game for Duke. My number 2 would be continuing struggles with Notre Dame's run defense, and I think there was some justification for it a little bit schematically on Saturday, but I do think it's a concern moving forward. And the last thing is ND's depth rising to the occasion with big plays, big performances, and big moments. So, Tyler, what are your 3?
Yeah, mine are a bit similar, at least at 2 of the topics specifically. As it relates to Riley Leonard, I thought there was more moments of confidence from him. To me, it seems like he's seeing the field better and making throws downfield with more decisiveness. He certainly has plenty of room left to improve, and I didn't necessarily like the way a big chunk of the game went for Notre Dame and the way they were attacking Louisville when they had a lead. But I did think it was an improved performance for Riley Leonard and made some good throws on that what ended up being game-clinching drive in the fourth quarter. My second one was Notre Dame is being saved by its defensive depth right now. I think we're reaching the point where Notre Dame may be starting to get stretched too thin, particularly on the defensive line. But the fact that Leonard Moore can play like he did, Jordan Clark can play outside cornerback is extremely impressive. And that you've had guys step up on the defensive line to this point, whether or not they can make that work for the rest of the season.
Defensive backfield or the defensive line?
And on the defensive line, I think some guys have stepped up. The two things together. I'm not as
Okay.
worried about the secondary long term. I am worried about the defensive line long term. But I think so
Tyler,
far
there
they've
is
done a
a
good
no
enough job.
drinking rule on this show.
Well,
At
I was
least this
pre-gaming.
week.
I was pre-gaming. My third one is Notre Dame needs to be more consistent with his rushing attack. Notre Dame can't just be big hitters by Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price in the running game. And the lack of those on Saturday, I think, really showed up against a better defense, certainly. So I think Notre Dame just needs to be more consistent with its running game. Certainly the passing game restrictions and inconsistencies have only heightened the need for the running game to be better and made it a little bit harder for the running game. But I do think that's something that Notre Dame needs to sharpen as the season moves forward.
Okay, so we're going to review the personnel situation, people that missed the game or left the game and didn't return. Ben Morrison did. Benjamin Morrison missed about 12 snaps, which really, given everything that was going on in the defensive backfield, caused Notre Dame to kind of show what Plan D looks like. And I do mean Plan D from a standpoint of how far of the contingencies they got to, with Jordan Clark moving over to an outside corner, and Rod Hurd II moving from safety to play the nickelback against some really good wide receivers from Louisville. Ja'Cory Brooks, we knew, was a very good receiver. That was the debut in a Louisville uniform for Colin Lacey, who's a slot receiver who had over 90 catches and 1,300 yards receiving last year at South Alabama and was one of the top portal gets as a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. So playing in the slot against him was a big deal. So here's who went down, or was it cleared initially? So Christian Gray, who I misspelled on my screen, but you guys can't see that. I changed his name to Christane. He had a shoulder injury, I guess, during the week, and they were under the impression he'd be able to go on Saturday. He got into warmups. It didn't loosen up, and so Leonard Moore ends up getting not only his first start, but plays every one of the 76 defensive snaps. Notre Dame lost linebacker Jack Kaiser. He did not play in the second half. Viper Boubacar Traore went out in the first quarter. Wide receiver Jordan Faison went out in the first half, and offensive guard Sam Pendleton, he went out late in the game. I think Sullivan Absher came in for about 5 plays to take his place. Players on the mend who could return in October are tight end Cooper Flanagan, offensive guard Billy Schrouth, nose guard Gabe Rubio, and safety Tay Johnson. Of those, that second list, Tyler, who do you think's return will help Notre Dame most, and who do they need most from that first list to keep the momentum going?
Yeah, in terms of the second list, I think Gabe Rubio and Billy Schrouth are the two that are most needed. I'm not sure if it's in that order. I think Billy Schrouth is Notre Dame's best offensive lineman when he's healthy. So I think maybe he would have to be at the top just because of that. But I do think the interior of Notre Dame's defensive line needs some extra bodies. The rush defense hasn't been as good as we'd like it to be. And so I think Gabriel Rubio is someone that could help for that. Now, I'm a little concerned about he's not even dressing for games on Saturdays, so that I don't think he's practiced much. I believe I didn't see him dressed when we were doing interviews on Tuesday before escorted into the public in the middle of a tornado warning. But that was so that's a lot of progress he needs to make for someone who hasn't played a lot of football this calendar year. So I'm worried if he can be, how much he can help for the Stanford game, I should say. In terms of the other guys that they need, I think Christian Gray, you feel a lot better about your cornerback depth when he's out there, and I think he's a good player as well. Traore is certainly someone you would like to have back. I don't have a great feeling about Notre Dame's chances of that happening. Faison, we've seen what the offenses look like without him. It hasn't been great, but it hasn't necessarily been significantly better with him in it. and Kaiser as sort of the leader, your linebacker, you would like to have in there. But I think the young linebackers are playing pretty well right now. So there's a lot of things that need to be answered between now and that Stanford game about who's going to be able to take the field for Notre Dame.
Okay. Well, one thing before we get to your questions and get into our next topic is we have a message from our partners at Autograph that Tyler is going to tell you about, because usually I throw in too much stuff about my grandkids in it.
Hey, Autograph loves your grandkids. Autograph, as you should know by now, you can find Inside Indy Sports content on the Autograph app, which is a free to download app on Android and Apple devices. The company, which was co-founded by Tom Brady, believes that devotion should be rewarded and the future of fandom belongs to fans. There are many cool tools and features in the app, including the daily replay, which summarizes the news from the previous day with links to content you may have missed. I like to check that out to see what I may have missed about either Notre Dame or as a Chicago Bears fan, I use the app as well. And you can even buy tickets using the app. I know at least one Notre Dame fan did so last week when I recommended it to him. So that is somewhere you can look for tickets with no fees attached to them. So if you're looking for Notre Dame tickets in the future, check out the app and you can find some options that you may like. You can download the app using the QR code at the bottom of our screen or by using the link listed in the video description below. From there, go find our content in the Notre Dame community. And there's a little ticket icon at the bottom if you're looking for the ticket options. And if you do download the app, make sure you use referral code INDS so that Autograph knows that we sent you.
Okay. So we are now going to move on to what Marcus Freeman's bi-week to-do list should look like. And I'm in charge of Marcus this week. We know that it's going to include recruiting. We know that it's going to include rest for some of the injured players that need to get healthy. We know that there's going to be some recalibrations. I tried to get Marcus to talk about it in more detail, and he just agreed with me that they need to improve. So we didn't get a whole lot of detail. So I came up with my own list today. You can read my analysis if you're a subscriber. But we're going to do a little bit today. We're also going to work in some of your questions because some of you have come up with some pretty good ones that matched my ideas. So we're going to go with Scott Fagan. Guys, would you think the biggest work during this week would be the offensive line? Curious if we see moves for the Stanford game. Now, this was on my list. I came up with 5 things, and I did say giving the offensive line attention. I'm going to let Tyler answer this first, and then I'll kind of give what I mentioned in my analysis.
One, I think it's tough. Yeah, you have to know the status of your players, right? Whether or not Billy Strouth can play dictates a lot about what you're going to want to try to do with your offensive line. So to me, when you get Billy Strouth back, then it's a competition for the left guard job. I think everything should be on the table there. Otherwise, I don't know that you're going to do much else with the offensive line. Certainly, those guys need to improve and continue to work together. But I don't know that there's answers that aren't being tapped to play on Notre Dame's roster that are better than the ones Notre Dame is using so far. Now, maybe there's some way you can rotate someone in, whether it's Sullivan Absher or Gerby Lambert. I don't know that that's the best for a line that needs to work on its chemistry and communication. So to me, I don't know that changing things up is what would produce the best outcome for Notre Dame. But as we've seen with under Joe Rudolph specifically, like he's not afraid to move guys around. And if he does that, you hope it's a little bit more successful than it was mid-game against Louisville last year, because that was a bit of a disaster. But I think he's done a decent job of making the best of what the hand that he's been given this year, because he's been given some awful injury luck on the offensive line so far.
I'm going to get into this a little bit more, but I want to address the guard thing. And I think we're in agreement that when Strouth comes back, he's the starter. I think he is Notre Dame's, or what they felt like going into the season was their best 1 or 2 linemen. And I still feel like they believe that way. I'll tell you what, Pat Coogan has played really well at center since he's been the starter. I don't know that Rocco's been as consistent. So I agree with Tyler that if there's a competition, it's going to be at left guard with Sam Pendleton and Rocco Spindler. And Spindler played a lot of left guard in the spring and in the summer and through the first few weeks of fall camp. That was the position that he was working at. So here's another question. Could Lambert be a better option at left tackle? So let's talk about the tackles. Tyler, what I wrote in the analysis, and I'm sure you've gone over it with a fine-tooth comb with all you've got on your plate today. But I think you have to ask the questions. I don't necessarily think they need to do this, but I think questions they need to ask, and they may say no to all these. Does Tosh Baker deserve a second look? I thought Anthony Knapp had his best game of the season. I know Pro Football Focus thought he did. Not that he was reminding anybody of Joe Alt, but given who the defensive ends were on Louisville, I thought he held up pretty well. I think if you're going to make a move from Emil Wagner from left to right, which I don't think is going to happen, this would be the week that you would think about that. And if you thought, hey, is Gerby Lambert at this point better than Anthony Knapp, I think these are the times that you ask those questions. My sense is that they'll say no to all those. But Tyler, what do you think? To Scott's question specifically, could Lambert be a better option at left tackle?
In the short term, I don't think so. Because what you would anticipate for any freshman being put in there, whether it's Anthony Knapp to start the season or Gerby Lambert now, he's going to have some ups and downs to start his season. Like if this is his first chance to be a starter, I don't know that him out of the gate for the next 3 or 4 games is going to be better than what you're already getting from Anthony Knapp. And so I think you're sort of losing what you've gained by having these playing opportunities for Anthony Knapp by putting someone like Gerby Lambert in there. I don't know that Gerby Lambert is that ready to play that he's going to be like he's not only going to limit his mistakes right away as a true freshman playing in his first meaningful moments, but also be better than someone that was in the same boat as him a month ago. So I'm not convinced that is there, but I got to be. I mean, none of us know for sure because we're not watching Gerby Lambert in practice every day. Maybe he's making tremendous strides and is ready to do that, but I'm not convinced that. Now maybe I get proved wrong, but that's my viewpoint of it on it at least.
Okay, one of the things that I've talked about is Notre Dame's need to have a better run defense, and one of the things I came up with as a bye week priority was, again, some of these you may take a look at and say we're fine with what we're doing, but I do think Notre Dame needs to look at the 5-man linebacker rotation and see if it can be tweaked. I'm not saying get rid of it, but I think there's times it seems like teams take advantage when both Bowen and KVA are out of the game and Notre Dame is a little bit smaller. And I'm not sure that all that versatility of playing the 3 positions is necessarily what Notre Dame needs at this point. It felt like Drake Bowen is really settling into being a really good middle linebacker. I think either he or KVA need to be in there all the time, and sometimes both of them. I think Osbury's played really well. Jalen Sneed only played 12 snaps, and that wasn't because of injury. Kaiser was limited to 16. But I'm wondering what your thoughts. Do you think that this 5 linebacker rotation is working? Do you think they're, with a little bit more continuity, maybe Notre Dame would be a little bit better against the run instead of subbing within series and when it's not necessarily down and distance related?
To let folks know, like I don't study the defense on a weekly basis to the same extent that I study the offense. There's just not enough time in the week for me to do that without how much time I take watching and replaying everything that happened on offense. So I don't get the sense that like all the run game issues are on the linebackers. So
I don't think all of them, but I'm thinking of ways to improve it, and you can give your other ways you think will improve it too, to answer Mike's question.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the right answer. I'm not saying it isn't the right answer, but I don't feel strongly one way or the other. I like the idea of playing Bowen and KVA more. I do wonder what you give up in terms of pass coverage with those guys. I'm not sure that they've shown to be as good in pass coverage this season, and so that could be a sacrifice that you have to sort of figure out if you're going to go heavy with those guys. I think the interior defensive line needs to play better. I think your limitations at Viper have become more obvious as the season has gone on, because Jordan Botello is a pretty good run defender, or was a pretty good run defender at this point of his career. Traore has his moments. He's obviously a smaller guy. He can get overpowered sometimes. And I'm not sure that, like, someone like Logan Thomas, if he's in the game, like how stout is he going to be against the run? So I think that's a concern that I don't know the answer for moving forward. And I think that's one of the priorities for Notre Dame this bye week, is to develop a plan at Viper if you don't have Boubacar Traore for the long term, which would be my fear and guess that would be the case. So do you move over someone like Bryce Young to that spot? Do you move Joshua Burnham over some? I think it's probably a little of everything. I don't know that there's one guy. It's the answer is one person. Certainly you can play KVA or Jalen Sneed in a role like that on passing downs. I'm not sure that either would be a good fit for that on running downs, on early downs. So I think it's a combination of things that's leading to some weaknesses in the run defense at times. And I think some of it also is Notre Dame's okay with you taking some rushing yards if it's going to be able to limit your big plays. That is maybe an area where Notre Dame's willing to cede some yardage if it's going to be sharp in the red zone and not give up big plays down the field.
Yeah, I would agree on that. That's kind of their philosophy, and I thought certainly that's what I'm kind of foreshadowed in the beginning of this, was with Leonard Moore having to play 76 snaps and then being really thin on the back end. I think it made sense to protect him and have safety help and not drop a safety down in the box. The one thing I would like to see schematically, though, is situationally Notre Dame move away from that, like when Northern Illinois was kind of running it down their throat at the end of that game and hogging the ball and controlling the clock. I would have liked to see Notre Dame mix it up a little bit more in that situation and not get pushed down the field. One of my 5 things that I said was in my analysis was straighten the edges, meaning getting the Viper and field end spots. And Tyler, you hit on some good concepts there. Whether Boubacar comes back or not, I think looking at Josh Burnham as being a possible swing player makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think Logan Thomas can only play for you situationally. I don't know that Junior Tui Halamaka has the burst that you need. Certainly Logan at 224 doesn't have the size you need to be a consistent force there. Burnham's played the position. I think he's got a burst and he's also strong. And I think Bryce Young's progress has given you some confidence that you can play him more snaps. He played 38. He played more than RJ Oben on Saturday. And according to Pro Football Focus, he played better than RJ Oben on Saturday. They'd certainly like to get more mileage out of RJ, but Bryce Young is going to give you some things. If they need to add somebody to that field end, I'll throw this out and I'll tell you what I think then, Tyler. Would you move Brendan Vernon back there to give you another body, or would you say, oh my God, we've seen this movie before with somebody else?
To the field end role?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I would be against trying it if that's what you need. We certainly aren't seeing him getting it, cracking the depth chart at the defensive tackle position. I'm not sure what Vernon's workload looks like in practices, where he's spending more time during the season. But yeah, I think he's probably someone you need to train as a field side end to be able to help the depth there and give you more versatility in terms of moving some guys around. Because I don't know that there's a lot of other options that seem viable, right? I don't know what else, where else you would look, and especially someone who was so highly touted coming out of high school. You'd like to think you could find some role for him, even if it's a small one, to be prepared for in case he's needed. And that hasn't been seemingly in the plans at this point.
Yeah, I'll go through the rest of my list. The last two I had was, giving a look to maybe some changing roles in the back end of the defense. If Christian Gray comes back, that helps. But you had a situation on Saturday. Marcus didn't say how few reps those guys got at those new positions, but he alluded to the fact that they didn't have a lot of practice there. So my question is, does Rod Hurd serve you better by maybe having a more versatile role where he is playing some corner? Now, I would leave Jordan Clark where he is. They shifted both of them on Saturday. I maybe see if Rod Hurd could help you at an outside corner. Notre Dame does have some young safeties that are coming on that could maybe fill his rotational role a little bit more if needed. Kennedy Urlacher and Luke Talich come to mind. But I think that's something I'd look at and put on the table for discussion. The other thing is working with a quarterback, and I'm not saying making a change at quarterback, and nobody so far in the comments has made that suggestion, although I have my bet on who I think will eventually. So I'm not going to name them. But I think, again, this is a real opportunity to see where Riley Leonard is, get him better with extending plays, getting better with his footwork, reading the defenses better. He made a step forward on Saturday, I thought, and you need to do that. You also need to keep Steve Angeli engaged and keep him getting better and keep him getting good reps, because he's one injury away from taking this team into the playoff if that happens. And so I think that's really important to keep his development going.
Yeah, as it relates to Angeli, you'd like to think that he understands that. Like, I don't know that he would still be at Notre Dame if he wasn't willing to do that. And just the sort of experience of watching what Riley Leonard has gone through makes it clear, like, hey, there could be an opportunity for you sooner rather than later. So you got to be ready. So I would like to think that would continue to motivate him. As for the offense and the passing game with Riley Leonard, yeah, I think you got to continue to find plays that are both staples and new wrinkles for him to feel comfortable operating. And the best way to do that is obviously giving him all kinds of different coverage looks to be prepared for, and working through those progressions, which he seemingly is doing more and more of as the season is going on. But certainly there's plenty of room for improved play out of that position. So you want to keep challenging Riley Leonard there. As for the Rod Hurd thought about moving him to outside cornerback, I think I would probably prefer to push Carson Hobbs as a freshman cornerback on the outside. Then
I definitely had that in there as fast tracking him. I just didn't say it. I telepathically I meant to say it. But
yeah, and so like to me that would be my preferred option of those two. I'd rather keep Rod Hurd good, and he's contributing at the roles that he already has, and so I don't want to take that away from him. Whereas Carson Hobbs, like, he's not being used elsewhere. So I know maybe you'd like to redshirt him, but if there's ever a need for cornerbacks, I think you're looking at it now. So I think you're going to have to give him some opportunities. And Notre Dame is strong in cornerback recruiting, so it's not like they're going to be hard up for it in 4 years if Carson Hobbs doesn't redshirt. So I think that would be a preferred solution, at least for my position. But I'm not the one having to coach a freshman up either. So,
well, I'll tell you what, though, Mike Mickens has a good track record of coaching freshmen up and getting himself ready as a freshman. He was a very good freshman at Cincinnati. So Marcus Freeman is 3-0 coming off a bye week. This will be his fourth try going against Stanford. Only one of those teams had a winning record. That was BYU, and they were ranked 16th at the time Notre Dame played them, and they finished 8-5. Brian Kelly, incidentally, was 14-2 coming out of bye weeks. So those guys both did pretty good jobs coming out of bye weeks. So big picture, what does Notre Dame need to do to make the playoff? What does it need to do to get a home game? What does it need to do to win a playoff game? And are all three of these the same answer, Tyler?
I think they all start with the same point. Like, you got to win out. I think you have to win out to make the playoff. In order to get a home game, I think you have to win out impressively and hope that your schedule has impressive wins on it, in terms of who, not just how. And then in order to win a game in the playoff, I think you probably need to play one at home. So you would need to have win out impressively. And I think you're going to have much better line play on both sides of the ball, and then quarterback play in order to win a playoff game. So those are that's a lot to deal with in terms of things you need to do with the remaining schedule. There's certainly plenty of opportunities for Notre Dame to improve in those ways to be able to do that. And I think that's the optimistic outlook for what Notre Dame needs to do in order to get himself in a position to maybe meet some of the expectations that we and they had for themselves going into the season.
So the remaining schedule, there's 7 games. Only one of them has a losing record. The team that at least I thought was going to be a top 10 team, and that's Florida State. They're 1-4. And DJ Uiagalelei has a broken finger, I believe, and is going to miss several weeks. I'm not sure that that's the worst thing that can happen to that team right now. Maybe they need a new quarterback because he was not playing well. So the rest of the lineup looks like this. Stanford is 2-2. Georgia Tech is 3-2. Navy is undefeated and playing really well with a win over Memphis, notably. As we mentioned, Florida State 1-4 after the second bye. Virginia is 3-1. Army is 4-0. They have played a much softer schedule than Navy to this point. And then USC is 3-1, and they are ranked just outside the top 10. And then we have, in the rearview mirror, Louisville and Texas A&M are both top 25 teams this week, so they're both indirectly helping Notre Dame's resume. Tyler, do you think those two teams can stay in the top 25? Now, I'll give you a little hint on what's coming up for them. Home games against Missouri, LSU, and Texas highlight the Aggies' remaining slate, and then the card schedule isn't easy. That includes a home game with SMU on Saturday, and then games down the road with Miami, Boston College, Clemson, and the Kentucky team that just knocked off Ole Miss on the road. So at the end of the year, do you think those are top 25 teams?
I feel better about Louisville than I do about Texas A&M. I have my doubts about A&M's ability to do that moving forward. I was very impressed with Louisville on Saturday, even though there were some obvious errors that were self-inflicted on Louisville's end. But if Tyler Shuck plays like that the rest of the season, look out. Like he was playing lights out, and Notre Dame's defense was throwing everything it could at him, and his receivers were making plays. Certainly it wasn't enough to win, but I was very impressed with Louisville's passing game in particular on Saturday. So I think that team can stay in the top 25. Now, I know there are a lot of tougher games on the schedule for it, but I was impressed and more impressed by Louisville than I was Texas A&M, and not sure I've seen a ton from Texas A&M to this point to convince me that they're making significant strides, although their quarterback situation may end up helping out with that in terms of if they can get better or not. What do you think? You're the pollster. What would you predict?
Yeah, I think Louisville has the tougher of those schedules, even though Texas and Missouri, but at least they get those at home. I'm still trying to figure out who Texas A&M is with the quarterback situation they have. Wigman hasn't played much since he played against Notre Dame, and it looks like that's going to be a game time decision in their game this week. even with Louisville's difficult schedule, I kind of like the way they're constructed, and I like the way that they're going and how they might be able to handle those teams. I think they are going to give Miami a run for their money after watching Miami play Virginia Tech on Friday night with the weird ending. And as Brian mentioned, Navy's quarterback can throw. They have a different offense. It's a little bit more of a variation, a little bit more of a departure than traditional triple option football. They are number one in the country right now in pass efficiency, and they are actually averaging more passing yards per game than Notre Dame by just a few, but they are ahead of them in passing offense per game. So that's going to be really interesting. The one thing is, I looked at the statistics and I list everybody where, all the opponents in my story today, where they're ranked in every offensive and defensive category and such. Notre Dame doesn't play very many good pass defenses the rest of the regular season. And the next two are really bad pass defenses. So if you're going to see a jump in Riley Leonard's performance, this is maybe a couple of weeks where you can be a little bit more daring in the passing game. They don't play a lot of great total defenses either, but some of these teams are pretty good against the run.
What do you think about the Navy? I mean, I know that's looking ahead, but the problem that may present Notre Dame's defense as a defense that hasn't been as strong against the run as you'd like it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they are special situations, and you kind of have special schemes. And to this point, Al Golden has been pretty good against those option teams. It's just that this Navy team is a little bit more spread, and it really is assignment football, plus they're going to try to throw it over your head a lot more than they ever have, and they're better at it. Blake Horvath is the quarterback's name. He's, I believe, leading the country in yards per carry, so he's carrying it a lot. He averages over 10 yards a carry, and he throws the ball well. I think Navy is maybe the new trap game. I don't think October is as easy as it maybe presented itself in the preseason. Stanford, they have some difficult elements. I think that's probably going to be the easiest of the three games. Georgia Tech, Haynes King is a really good quarterback, and they are one of, I think, 2 or 3 teams that have not given up a sack yet. They have given up 0 sacks in 5 games. And then Navy, just with the wrinkle that they have, if they had an elite defense or even a really good defense to go with that, they'd be a little bit more scary. But they're going to be good enough defensively and disciplined enough. They're not going to beat themselves. So that's an interesting game. So from that, we're going to go to our 6-pack of questions, but I'm going to take a sweep here real quick and see if we want to get to a couple of these before. This is from Frank Sarah. Who is your best guess of who of the injured players will return to Stanford? I think you named some of the ones that were coming back. Of the guys that were injured on Saturday, I think you've also kind of speculated on that. Maybe Kaiser's the one that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, and I don't have any insight into what's going on with
Right.
Jack Kaiser. Christian Gray, I think you can count on being back.
Right.
I would be surprised if he's not back.
Faison, it looked like it was the same ankle he had originally hurt. He had it heavily taped,
right,
and was limping off on that. The thing about the way Notre Dame is doing injuries now, it's pretty much like clockwork, and they don't like to comment in between. I mean, we get rumors and things of that nature, and we've all seen how some of those rumors elsewhere on the internet blew up and were wrong. But we get them on Monday right before the press conference, and we'll get them Saturday an hour before the game. So in terms of official stuff, it's going to be the Saturday before, or the Friday. I'll get my days right. It's a bye week. Let me take a sip of coffee. Monday around noon, next Monday, a week from Monday. And so we'll go to this question. Eric, how long have you been in the business? It seems like 100 years today, doesn't it? You're probably wondering if I'm still qualified to be in this position. I had jet black hair when I started. I started in a full time. I worked at the Columbus, Ohio paper, the Citizen Journal, which was their morning paper when I was a college student. And I covered high schools and boxing at that time, amateur boxing. And one of the first boxing matches I covered was a guy by the name of Buster Douglas, who was in a Golden Gloves competition then. So that's how old I am. And some of you are probably saying, who's Buster Douglas? And I've written for the Columbus, Indiana paper. That was my first job. Then the Hammond Times for a year and a half, the South Bend Tribune for 33 years. And now it's Tyler and I with the Rivals Inside Indy Sports. And this is our third year with them. And this is the most fun I've ever had. And part of it is because Tyler puts up with me.
And Eric's his own boss.
And I'm my own boss. Yes, I don't have to worry about crazy decisions other than my own and Tyler's.
And ward count limits.
There you go. So, okay, we're going to go into our 2-minute drill. Let's see how we're doing on time here, because we do want to get into some recruiting. We got plenty of time, and we'll get to some more of your questions here too. I'm the question taker. Tyler's way better at that than I am. But we're going to do our 2-minute drill first, and then we'll get into some more questions. So the first one, Tyler, is Notre Dame stands 99th. Remember, this is a 2-minute drill. This isn't, we're not going expansive.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Okay, stands 99th as a team in pass efficiency 5 games into the season and is climbing. Will Notre Dame finish in the top 50?
I'm going to say no, with the reasoning being that I don't know that Notre Dame is going to have enough passing volume to get over that. I think in terms of the formula, your number of passes, I think, does help with that. And so I don't know that they'll be able to beat that. What do you think?
I'm going to say yes. I'm not super convinced of that because they have a long way to go. And yet as you move up, there's not a lot of difference between, let's say, Team 99 and Team 75. But getting up to 50 is a pretty good climb. I think the fact that they don't play a lot of good pass efficiency defenses, the 3 best that they play are already in the rearview mirror. And I think Riley Leonard's going to get better. The wide receivers will get better. The offensive line theoretically will get better. So I'm gonna put my slot in yes, and we'll go back and revisit these. If I'm right, if I'm wrong, we'll forget about it.
They never happened.
Okay. Second question. Do you think Marty Biaggi doing double duty with safeties and special teams is negatively affecting special teams in any way? We don't have evidence, but we're guessing.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like a kick returner fumbling like that's practice. Like it's not like that isn't because like Marty Biaggi doesn't know how to teach those guys how to run with the ball. Like, so like that's not his fault. Like, I almost feel like the decision to move the bad snap that led to a field goal, like a missed field goal situation in the Miami of Ohio game, it almost felt like overcoaching. Like they had Reno in there and it didn't seem like they were having big troubles with the snapping. And then they put Andrew Cross in there, and then his first one, he has a bad snap. Now, I think Marty has explained that there were some issues that they were trying to help with there. I think the size that Andrew Cross has probably is more helpful in terms of blocking up front on a field goal unit. So I would say no. I don't think so. I don't necessarily buy that. Do you?
I don't necessarily buy it either. I think I would look at it after the season and go through it and say, okay, was this taking too much away from the special teams? Because by and large, they do a good job. There's been these gaffes that are really noticeable where you go, oh my gosh, what's going on there? But, you know, every Tuesday night we get a chance to talk to the coordinators, and up until last week, Marty would answer safety questions too. They kind of caught on to us doing that and have limited him to special teams questions. But he's very good when you ask him a question about what went right and what went wrong. You know, he doesn't feel like he's making up the answers. But I do think I think he needs to kind of look at that, and Marcus needs to look at it at the end of the season. But I haven't seen evidence that that's the case.
Yeah, like
Okay,
even
go ahead.
some of the other things like the punting, like I don't know why it wasn't working, but we've seen that James Brendel is capable of those things, and if it's not happening on game days, is that because of the coaching or is that player execution? What was the other? Oh, and then the other thing I was just going to mention, they do have Jesse Schmidt, who's been here for a few years as a special teams analyst that they can lean on, and Michael Vincent has been helping out as well, Notre Dame's longtime long snapper. And so they have guys that are helping out with special teams. So it's not like Marty Biaggi is the only one that can get things in order for them. So it seems like they have enough bodies. I don't know that is the issue.
MJH Irish 84. I love your comment. I won't put it on the screen so that Tyler thinks I'm putting you on the payroll.
No, yeah, that's only allowed in your chat. Their compliments are only allowed in his chat, not in our chat.
Okay. Who is the starter? Number 3. Who is the starter or regular rotational player on offense whose last 7 games will be markedly better than the first 5, other than Riley Leonard, if you were considering him?
I would probably say Jaden Greathouse. And
okay,
maybe
I think that's a good answer.
Maybe that's because I think he is underachieved through the first 5 games. So I would put him there. I wonder if you could. I wouldn't be afraid to put Anthony Knapp on that list. Like, obviously, as a guy that's getting more and more experience, I think if he was able to do what he's done in his good moments to start the season, you wonder if he starts to get rid of some of those mistakes as his experience moves on. So those would be the guys that come to mind first for me. How about you?
I said Chris Mitchell more because I think the opportunities there, not necessarily because of what I've seen from him.
Yeah.
If I had to pick somebody that I'd like to kind of see on the outside, it almost could be Jaden Harrison. I mean, he doesn't profile well there. Maybe he doesn't, get off of press coverage well, and he's just better in the slot. But I have more confidence when Riley Leonard throws it to Jaden Harrison than I do Chris Mitchell. But Chris Mitchell had big numbers at Florida International last year, and I'm kind of holding out hope that maybe that happens for him. So that's why I picked him. How about on defense? And you can't pick Riley Leonard over there either.
Oh, darn. I was going to pick Riley Leonard. I would say maybe Howard Cross. I don't know that this has been Howard Cross's best 5 games. I have higher expectations for him. So I think that he could be better down the stretch for Notre Dame. I think somebody you'd really like to see be better would be RJ Oben. I don't know if that's going to happen. And you could probably point to any of those younger defensive ends too that are going to get more playing time here because of injuries. So, but I'll go with Howard Cross as my answer.
Okay, well, I'm thinking kind of the same way you are, but I went with Riley Mills. I don't think he's played up to his potential yet this year. I've been really surprised that he hasn't been more of a force in games, given what's on the line for him, given how experienced he is and the expectations for himself. So Riley Mills for me there.
Yeah, I think Louisville was one of his better games, so maybe that's why I didn't go with him. I thought he played pretty well.
Well, Howard Cross actually got an 89.2 grade from Pro Football Focus, which again, is not the end all be all. It's one evaluated tool, but that is his career high grade of any FBS opponent. The only higher grade for him was against FCS Tennessee State. But I didn't notice that in the game. I think your thought of Howard Cross was a good pick.
All right.
Okay. Will Notre Dame make the playoff? If not, why not? If so, what's their seed?
I'm going to say no right now. I'm just not confident that Notre Dame can win out. There are challenges left on this schedule, and as we've seen, like Notre Dame can get tripped up by seemingly anyone. So I haven't been convinced enough through 5 games that Notre Dame is going to be able to run the table. So maybe if they impress the next two opportunities against Stanford and Georgia Tech, I feel better about that. But I'm not quite ready to get my hopes up on that front yet.
I'm going to say, especially if Rob Hunt gets the game ball after Stanford, and Rob Hunt is the head trainer, and he did get the game ball once in his career under Marcus Freeman. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say the 8th seed. I think they will win out, but I am not super, super confident in that, but confident enough to say it on YouTube. Okay, number 5. What will Northern Illinois' regular season record end up at? They are 2-2 after losing to Buffalo in overtime, a Buffalo team that ended up losing to UConn the next week, 47-3. And then they played a very good game at NC State, were turnover prone, and lost that game 24-17. And Northern Illinois now is dead last in turnover margin in the country. So what is your thought about where they end up?
I went with 8-4. I think there's some decent teams in the MAC this year. I think Northern Illinois is probably, as we've seen since beating Notre Dame, going to be a little bit up and down. So I don't know that they're going to win out. And I don't see their season cratering, but Northern Illinois has had some seasons in the past where it has gone south. So we'll see what happens the rest of the season. But mine's 8-4. What do you say?
I say 7-5. There's some good teams in the MAC. Bowling Green gave Texas A&M all they could handle. They've got to play Toledo. They've got to play Miami, Ohio, which I still want to call Miami of Ohio. I think I'm going to start calling them Miami of Ohio and just not tell Bennett Wise, who's one of our partners at WSBT TV. He will get mad at me, but I'm going to say Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, they needed to beat Notre Dame to rid themselves of the of.
Yes, they're of right now. And then the last one on our list, and then we're going to get back to your questions, viewers, is who will be Notre Dame's starting quarterback in 2025? We've asked this before, but I just wanted to see if we're still giving the same answer or if we've changed our answer.
I'm still going to go with CJ Carr. I just like his upside. Notre Dame has refused to buy the Steve Angeli ticket to this point. And so I'm just not convinced that it'll happen next year. Well, I don't know what's going to happen. So CJ Carr would be my odds-on favorite.
I'm going to go with CJ Carr too. I would never write off Angeli, and I do think the offensive line next year will be more geared for him to make a run at it. All of them really, but I think that he would have a better chance with that offensive line. But so I'm not going to rule him out, but CJ Carr would be the guy that I think would win it. And speaking of the offensive line, Brian has this story. Proud of Knapp. What does he do when Jagaza comes back next year? This might be too late in the show to get answered. No, Brian, It's never too late.
I think move inside would be my guess. I think that's where he's a better fit physically. Where I think the holes in his game aren't maybe as obvious on the inside as they can be on the outside. So that would be my guess. Now it could go the other way around. I like Charles Jagasa could end up being in the guy that moves inside too. I wouldn't rule either that out. I think you're probably going to have Emil Wagner playing one of your tackle spots, just because I don't think he's a realistic candidate to play inside. So I think those two could move to guard and be successful at that position. So that would be my guess. I don't know which way I would lean. You'd have to see what Charles Jagasa looks coming back from injury. His pec / shoulder issue. That's usually not something that like hinders you long term. So I wouldn't imagine that impacting his ability to play on the outside or the inside. So we'll see what those guys look like heading into next season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting because Garby Lambert is going to keep pushing. I mean, he's a very physically talented guy. If you kick Knapp inside, and I do think Knapp will go inside, but who gets booted from their position if you put him inside? Because theoretically, everybody can come back that's on this roster. That actually includes Tosh Baker. He's one of the few guys that has a COVID year next year. So you have a lot of bodies. And then any of those three freshman tackles, do you see any of them doing anything but redshirting, or do you think one of them is talented enough to get in the mix next year and compete?
Oh, the guys that are incoming.
Yeah. Will Black.
I mean, I guess Will Black maybe, but the next year does not seem like the year you would need that, right? Yeah. I think you got too many guys, too many cooks in the kitchen right already. So yeah, that would be hard to imagine the need being there for that. But yeah, I do like Will Black a lot. I think probably as the career has progressed, maybe the most of those three, at least in terms of guys being ready to play right away. So maybe that's an answer, but yeah, I mean, you're gonna have Gerby Lambert challenging for one of those tackle spots as well. So it would be hard to imagine one of the freshmen next year being able to carve out a role.
Okay, we're gonna roll into recruiting next, and I do have a recruiting question up here, and this is from George from El Segundo, and George is a regular in my chats, and his question was so long that it cut off, but he wants to know, why doesn't Notre Dame recruit anybody from Modern Day High School in Santa Ana, California? And then he gives the reasons why that they should. George, I think, is close to my age group, so we're not very good sometimes in putting questions in the chat correctly. So I was happy to help him.
Yeah, Notre Dame does try. There has not been a lot of success, and so that, I think, it sort of compounds itself. Notre Dame will continue to offer guys out there. I pulled up in the 2025 class. Notre Dame offered 5 different players from that team that are in the same class. I mean, that's how talented that program is, that Notre Dame would offer 5 guys that are seniors right now on that roster. The only one they had real traction with was Chuck McDonald III, a cornerback who's committed to Alabama. It's a tough program to recruit because there are a lot of everyone recruits that program, and a lot of programs have had more recent success recruiting out of Modern Day than Notre Dame has. Notre Dame has had pretty bad luck in terms of recruiting there. It used to be a USC stronghold, and as USC has fallen off in recent years, more and more programs have been able to poach players from that program. But Notre Dame hasn't really been a beneficiary there. They'll continue to try. Looking at the 2026 class, Notre Dame's offered Caden Dixon Wyatt, a wide receiver, Chris Henry Jr., who's already committed to Ohio State, and Tomu Topui, a defensive lineman. I don't know that Notre Dame has much traction with any of those guys at this point either. So Notre Dame's trying. It's just become a school that hasn't been looking very favorably at Notre Dame in recent years. So we'll see if Marcus Freeman can try to navigate that. But sometimes you have to sort of pick your fights and figure out where you can win some battles for it. Notre Dame's at least throwing its name into the mix and then trying to see if it can get any takers from there.
Okay, so it was not a recruit-a-palooza, but there was some big recruiting stuff going on this weekend. What can you share with us? I know you got tons of stuff on the Insider Lounge because I was reading it and eating that up, and just curious what you can share from this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, no commitments. So the men's basketball program is really outpacing the football program this fall right now. But
what is it, 4 and 8 days?
Yeah, 4 and 8 days for the men's basketball program. But the football program had a good weekend by the sounds of it. The person I like the most in terms of being a Notre Dame commit at some point becomes Sullivan Garvin, who received an offer. He's out of Allegan, Michigan. And he's been on campus a couple times already, got an offer, called it a dream offer. I think Notre Dame's the leader there. We'll see if he ends up. To me, it's more of when he ends up in the class than if. I would be surprised if he doesn't end up in the class. Madden Farimo's the guy everyone wants to know about. He was back on campus. I still think Notre Dame's a good spot there. The longer that one goes, the less you feel good about it. I think Notre Dame would like to wrap his recruitment up. But USC, being the most local school for him as a California guy, is really trying to keep him out west. And then the other big name to know was Isaiah Mizell out of Orlando, Florida. He's committed to Arizona, wide receiver that Notre Dame's trying to flip. Notre Dame's continuing to make ground there, but has not been able to successfully flip him yet. We'll see how that continues to progress. So no great news to report yet, but maybe some signs of progress as Notre Dame's trying to get some momentum in both the 2025 and 2026 classes, because it's been a little bit of the status quo there for a while, but Notre Dame still has the number 9 class in the country for 2025, and it's still too early to sort of worry about the rankings in the 2026 class.
And for women's basketball fans, the women's basketball team and their recruits were at the football game on Saturday. And Dania Prawl, who's a 5-star guard in the 2025 class, made an official visit. Unofficially, the number 2 player in the 2026 class, Kate Harpring of Atlanta, was at the game on an unofficial visit. Her dad is former NBA player Matt Harpring. So, Tyler, I think unless you have some really great insight that you can squeeze into the next minute or two, I think we're pretty close to the end here.
No, I just wanted to add that Pete Rose died during our show, so rest in peace to the hit king Pete Rose. Yeah.
Wow.
So
when I was a little kid, that's who I patterned my batting stance after, and I got about 3,192 fewer hits in my major league career than him.
Yeah, so rest in peace to Pete Rose. He was actually supposed to be in the area somewhat recently and didn't make that trip. So maybe that was related to it. But that's certainly big news in the sporting world since we've been live. But nothing else to report as of right now. But stay tuned to what we have coming either in the podcast sphere. We'll have a podcast later this week and maybe a little something extra as well. No place your bets with no game, and obviously no post-game takeaways with no game. But we'll have plenty of content over on InsideNDSports.com to check out. If, like we mentioned at the top of the show, subscribe to our channel, hit the comments. If you like what we had to say or dislike what we had to say, either way, we want to hear from you. Thanks for everyone for joining us.
And be back next Monday for the injury update extravaganza.
Yeah, no kidding. We're going to have to dedicate 30 minutes just for injury updates next week.
Thanks for all the great comments and the questions and for putting up with us, especially putting up with me. You guys have a great night.
You did great, Eric.